Everyone. Welcome to an interesting brewing conversation on artificial intelligence and its effect on the banking, financial services, and insurance sector. The pandemic brought with it innumerable challenges for both legacy systems and brave new startups in the BFSI industry. What has distinguished businesses that have thrived from those that didn't is the willingness to adopt digital transformation, including AI, which is artificial intelligence, and other cutting edge technologies to speed up processes and serve customers without a hitch. The service model that we relied on just a few years ago are now obsolete. And as an industry, we need to constantly innovate. Well, just to give you certain numbers, the market for AI in the BFSI sector was worth over USD 15 billion in 2021, and it is expected to grow at a rate of 35% CAGR, from 2022 to 2028. Well, I am Aanchal Jaiswal, Head of Customer Success and Service at Edvanza. Our vision here is to be a career advancement partner that enables professionals everywhere to achieve a successful and fulfilled life. We aim to enable employers to build a global talent pool equipped with future-ready skills and, in turn, deliver tangible socioeconomic benefits to their communities. With this, please let's welcome Mr. V Dipu, Global Award-winning Digital Transformation and Innovation Leader, Senior President, Head Operations and Customer Service at Bajaj Allianz. Welcome, sir. How are you today? Sir, you have been here for the longest of the time, and you're a global award-winning digital transformation and innovation leader, and you're heading as a senior president of head of operations and customer services, Bajaj Allianz. We really wanted to get started with the conversation here. So, you've had a phenomenal career, sir, so far, and you've transformed multiple businesses and scaled them so far. We all would really like to learn from you, your learnings from your career transitions, and what got you here where you are at today.
Yeah. No, firstly, thank you for your, kind words, and once again, thank you all for, waiting for me, so patiently. I think you're being kind because, in the corporate sector, you always have, a long way to go because, the ladder is, it's never ending, right? So one cannot, rest and think, that one has been, successful. You don't stop, right? You need to, keep going. But from a learning perspective, if you ask, what lies, at the heart of various innovation and transformation efforts, I've been able to distill my experience, into a 5-step process, and that, pretty much drives these efforts. See, the first step is to listen to the customer. And while it looks extremely simple, and somebody may even wonder, why is it being said? But that's actually a step, a lot of people miss. Because a lot of people think, that they know what the customer wants, but it's important to actually, hear from customers. So clearly that's step number one. It's a very simple step, so I'll not spend time on that, but I just want to say that that's very important. The second step, this many of you may not have heard of, but I think, that's what sets you apart, from the rest of the pack is how are you, once you listen to the customer, how are you able to figure out not only his or her stated needs, but also figure out his or her unstated needs. Because when customers speak, they themselves may have needs which they are not in a position to articulate. And if you can figure out those needs, you can stay ahead of the pack. And I'll, of course, elaborate this, with a couple of examples as I go along. The third step then is to take, an inventory of your current landscape of systems and processes. And you will hear a lot of firms talk about customer centricity. But if you truly look at, the way firms are set up, is the customer really at the center of everything that the firm does? For example, if you go to a bank, right, take a universal bank, it's very unlikely that in a lot of places, you will have, a one-stop window, where you will get all services, right? If you want to basically look at deposits, you may have to go to one particular relationship manager, or a place. If it is wealth management, you need to go to a different place. If it is, loans, you need to go to a different place. Housing loan, car loan, right? I mean, the needs can vary. So it's typically, department led and not necessarily customer led, so I think that's what happens. The fourth step then is to re-engineer this landscape, keeping the customer in mind, because you've heard from the customer in step 1, and you also figured out his stated and unstated needs in step 2, and then re-engineer this because you need to set it right before you embark on your transformation journey, because the system is only as good as the input that you give it. And then comes the fifth step, which is basically to launch your digital solution. Now, what happens very often is, in the quest for speed, we sometimes tend to skip, steps 1 to 4. And then if you do that, you may launch a solution, But then, that solution may not necessarily see the light of day, or it may not necessarily get scaled up. And the other aspect, when it comes to solutions is very often, we find people, getting caught up, with the latest buzzwords in town. So if somebody's talking about blockchain, we'd like to be, seen there, and, therefore, we'd like to do something, in the area of blockchain. But ultimately, you need to solve a customer problem, right? So sometimes it can be a very simple solution. Sometimes, it can be a state-of-the-art digital solution. So again, you need to figure out what is the right fit. But pretty much, if you follow this five-step process, extremely simple and equally powerful, more often than not, you're likely to find success.
You're so spot on, sir. There, I mean, having myself served customers for almost 18 years now globally. The one thing that has gotten me to wherever I am at the journey is that you always listen to the customer. You establish the needs, and you obviously focus your solutions, your responses, your reactions absolutely around with them and for them. So yes, absolutely with you. So this brings me to another question, sir. We all have been through covid created ruckus for all of us, and there has been a major thrust in the digitization across the industry, and especially in the emerging economies like India, Nigeria, and UK. How does really AI amalgamate with customer service in the BFSI sector? Can we get to the nuts and bolts of it, please?
Yeah. You see, while we all talk about, AI, and like I said, people talk about AI, ML, and, all the state of the art, technologies that have come across, because buzzwords, have a tendency, to pick up, a momentum of their own, and everybody, relates to, tries to, relate themselves to it. What is important is to understand how can we convert, any new technology, or how can we convert any new potential solution on the horizon into a meaningful outcome for a customer. So let me explain this, with the help of two examples, which will highlight, how we've been able to leverage AI. Let's take our own industry, the insurance industry. Now, what is the moment of truth here? The moment of truth is the claim process. That's the reason you buy the insurance policy, so that if you are in trouble, you can reach out to your insurer. And the motor line of business is one of our biggest lines of business. Now, earlier, what would happen in case you crashed your car? You would have to reach out to the insurance company. They would find the nearest inspector. He would then come to the site of the crash, examine the vehicle, submit his report, and the whole process would kick in. It could take days. Now, thanks to AI, up to certain amounts, we've been able to crunch turnaround time from several days to as less as 20 minutes. So now what happens? It's just a two-click process for the customer. Click step number one, click photographs of the car, in case you have a damaged car. And step number two, upload them using the mobile app. And what happens is, because here there's no inspector, right? You're just uploading photographs on the mobile app. We have an AI engine at the back end, which we have taught using our years of expertise in this area, which can quickly assess the images and then convey the amount back to the customer, based on the images the customer has uploaded. The customer gives his consent, and then we just transfer the money to him. So something which would take days, now can happen in as less as 20 minutes up to certain amounts. So clearly a case of, how we've been able to leverage AI to make a difference to customers. The other example is in the area of customer servicing, and especially when you spoke in the context of COVID. What happened when COVID happened? There was a lockdown virtually overnight. We had to work from home, and you couldn't even go anywhere, right, for many weeks, because you're not supposed to step out of your house. Now, how do typical call centers work? Call centers work when you have large aggregations of people, on a single floor, because the inbound call monitoring software will basically batch customer calls and then allocate them to the various call center executives as and when they get freed up. Now, overnight call centers stopped functioning when the lockdown happened. And that's when, our digital assets came to the fore. They were able to fill the gap, and then basically service customers. And that's where AI came in. So instead of, let's say, reaching out to our call centers, which couldn't operate at full capacity, customers could reach out to us using our chatbot. Now, what happens in our chatbot? It's obviously AI led. It basically understands customer utterances and then, gives solutions. But we went one step ahead. Rather, we went three steps ahead. The first is, in case the bot got stuck for that particular transaction, it would seamlessly get transferred to a human being who would take it through to completion. So the customer doesn't get stuck. And then all these utterances which the bot couldn't understand, we would teach the bot at the back end, using NLP. And then the bot over a period of time started to address more and more queries. So its own percentage of first time query resolution went up. The other is we were also able to launch our bot in languages beyond English, because in the context like India, if you're able to speak to customers using digital assets in multiple languages, you can amplify your reach. And the third thing which we did, where we are pioneers, is we were also able to integrate our bot with Alexa and Google Assistant. So people who had Alexa or Google Assistant at home, they could just voice their command. So for example, if we ask, hey Alexa, can I get a copy of my insurance policy? Alexa would speak to a bot, and the policy would get, dispatched to your email ID. So that's how, we were able to leverage AI. I just wanted to share these two examples to tell you how it came alive, especially in the context of the pandemic.
Absolutely, that's absolutely so much interesting. I mean, integrating Alexa. I've heard about the IoT and how these things are taking care of all your household stuff, but this is quite interesting. Thank you very much for that information, sir. With the advent of digital transformation, it is like literally into each and everything that we do in our businesses each day. We do see scarcity of relevant skills. We all know that there's a huge gap. How do you see the skills and the workforce market developing for these technologies, and how our young professionals can absolutely learn how what skills to go for, and reskill or rebuild themselves to get to the career goals in the FSI sector?
I think it's largely, a composition or a combination of three steps. I think the first thing for young professionals, like it always happens, is to basically figure out which particular skill, or career sector has the maximum demand in the corporate sector. Because ultimately, it's a supply demand equation. So therefore, you figure out, which are the areas, which are in demand. What is also important is for each individual to also figure out whether it fits in with his own orientation, right? Because you just cannot latch on to something, if you are in basically or inherently uncomfortable with it. You need to like it, right? So I think there should be a match between your passion and what is in demand in the market, and I think figure out that sweet spot, that intersection, which can work for you. The second is, you touched upon the solution even in the question that you asked, which is about skilling and reskilling. Today, we can't say, that I've done my formal education, I'm done for life, and I'm going to just, now start working. Today, everybody is a student, and you have to be a lifelong student, Today, it's not about being a know-it-all. Today, it's about being a learn-it-all. So if you can really get that into your head, and if you can be a lifelong learner, and be agile, you'll really find that, you open up career options for yourself. The third thing I think, which is, important is not just, to focus on, let's say, digital technologies or core technologies, because there are areas, where, bots can do, very well, but also focus on how the human element can come in, because ultimately we are human beings. So what we are seeing the post-pandemic era is there is a shift in strategy from digitizing the physical to humanizing the digital. So how do you come in there? How do you ensure that, we get the best of, man and machine? And I think if you can figure that out and, follow these three steps, you would have opened up a lot of career options for yourself.
Absolutely, and in fact, this brings me to a very very beautiful statement put in by Abhijit Bahaduri, who's just recently joined Microsoft as their chief learning officer. So what he said was that technology has to adapt to the human intelligence that we have. So obviously, there has to be a beautiful marriage between human intelligence and the artificial intelligence. So absolutely, thank you very much for that. So this, I would really like to kind of branch out of this conversation just to the soft skills part of it as well, Bipu sir. We are all talking about all the hard skills, NLP, machine learning, and whatnot. But you know what? I believe, in my opinion, that if you really want to be a great data scientist, you need to be a great storyteller too. So how do you see those skills really marrying in the future, in the current state where, soft skills and hard skills are married together to build a great scalable workforce across the globe?
I think Anchal, you couldn't have, articulated that better, because soft skills are, as important as hard skills.
Absolutely.
What happens, when we study, in the quest for grades and academic success, right? There's a tendency to focus on hard skills, but studies show, that, and surprisingly, that your hard skills only account for 15% of your overall success. 85% of it comes from your soft skills, because we don't operate in a social vacuum, right? We deal with human beings all the time. So I think from a soft
Absolutely.
skills perspective, one very important thing is to focus on empathy. Because at the end of the day, whether it's dealing with your colleagues or whether it's dealing with your customers, you need to understand that you need to make them feel human, right? Even when customers talk to bots, they're more comfortable with bots, who can basically mimic human behavior. So empathy, is an extremely important, skill set to have, from a soft skills perspective. It's also important to be emotionally aware, right? That's where we use various terms, right? We use IQ, we use EQ. But to simplify things, you need to be emotionally aware, because life is not, a book, right? You just have a question and you have an answer. You need to modulate your response based on understanding of the situation, right? When you're dealing with, a lot of human beings across the entire spectrum, and they can be a range of emotions, right? And we've always seen that, when people, for example, are highly emotional, then you cannot use, logic to get through to them, because they both then operate in completely different cognitive spheres. So it's important to be emotionally aware. So I think emotional awareness, is an extremely important aspect. The third is, to the point that I made earlier as well, in everything that we do, right? While we focus on efficiency, while we focus on productivity, which is what, a lot of digitization focuses on, the human element, right? At the end of the day, behind every digital transaction, whom are you serving? Ultimately, you are responding to a customer, right? Who's a human being. So while the transaction can be physical, but the interaction has to be human. The outcome, has to have a human element. So I think if one can focus on these two, three aspects, emotional awareness, empathy, and the human element, then, and of course, one has a good grounding in hard skills, then the combination of soft and hard skills, can set oneself up, for a very promising career.
Absolutely. I mean, these words are resonating so well with the work that we do here at Edvanza. We lead with empathy. We lead with people who are high on emotional intelligence, because what only will bring you closer to people, and the rest will obviously settle around ourselves. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so very much for enlightening on that aspect, sir. You know, right now we have a lot of young professionals who are struggling with so many available career options and so many paths that they can take. I mean, now that we've gathered today to talk about the BFSI sector, would you be able to outline for us what are those specific skill set for the people to really, who can build a successful future ready career in a field that seems so changing and dynamic every day to day, with all the innovations and the new practices coming into the picture?
Yeah. See, I think it's got to be a combination of, functional and, technical skills, to the point that, we were discussing. I think from a functional perspective, it's very important to know your domain, right? Because technical skills can cut across domains, but you also need to have, an understanding of your domain, which means, understanding your customer, and then you're therefore able to figure out how to give the right technical solution. Because again, technology also does not operate in a vacuum, right? It's a means to an end. The end is, what the customer wants. So, therefore understanding that. The other is, understanding the interplay of, various components. While you basically understand technically, how various digital deployments or how various solutions can work. But when they come together, how do they create an enterprise-wide impact? That's again, an important part of the entire learning curve, because you need to maximize your impact. There could be many people out there who are very strong, on technical skills, but how can you join the dots and put it together to maximize impact? So I think that's again, an angle to focus on. Technical, there's of course, range of, technologies out there, and, people can, pick and choose what they're comfortable with. To the point that I made earlier, in terms of understanding what is your core passion and, what is the demand which is out there. And if you can have a sweet spot which marries the two, then you actually end up doing something which is in demand, but something which you love as well. So that's where I think, this combination of technical and functional can work together. And we also spoke about soft skills earlier, right? So if you can find
Yeah.
the sweet spot from a technical and functional perspective, and then have, soft skills on top of it, then as a combination, it becomes deadly. And then you just become a huge draw for, plenty of corporates.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. Well, last question from my side, sir. With digital transformation in operation, customer service, BFSI, there are many other fields and domains where we are seeing the advent of this, right? So would you be able to throw some light on what all other areas and domains in which our young professionals can move into, think of their career goals and futures there?
Yeah. See, when you look at what's happening in the world today, we also have, for example, today a lot of youngsters, who are born digital natives, right? A lot of their experience across industries, would have been through devices, and therefore, they would have understood, this entire digital landscape very well. So, from a career opportunity perspective, one, of course, given that the customer footprint is increasingly digital, is the entire area of data and analytics. It has been, of course, a pretty sought after area for quite some time now. But what you're now going to see, is its expansion at scale. And what firms want to do, is basically decentralize and democratize decision making, so that the person at the front of the line, who's interacting with the customer, has data at his fingertips, take quick decisions. So therefore, I think, getting a full understanding of data, and how you can leverage that, to bring greater value to the customers and to the firm, that becomes, a clear area. The other is looking at an end-to-end journey and then figuring out from an end customer perspective which technology fits in where. As I said, technology, is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. And therefore, if you can get a full understanding of, the overall customer journey to the point that I first made from in the five-step process, listen to the customer, re-engineer it, make sure that, the customer is the center of everything. But if you can truly make that happen, so that when every customer comes in, he feels special and therefore this entire journey is mapped, then you're able to take your firm to the, to the next level. So one is to look at this entire data and analytics perspective. The other is to look at, the entire end-to-end customer journey perspective and then see, how you can, drive that forward. And if you look at an enterprise wide, there's of course, plenty of areas can people get into because today any firm, has a host of functions. And even within functions today, there is again, there are a lot of sub functions as well. You look at any firm today and you would be able to drop, a truly granular org chart. You can't do it on one slide. It actually will run into, multiple, charts, right? And that's where, like I said, people need to understand what is the real passion, what drives them. I'm harping on that point again and again because a whole debate on passion versus purpose has opened up today, and it's important for people to figure out what they really love doing because then it's sustainable, right? Because if you otherwise, what happens is, it doesn't become sustainable. People can fall into a burnout situation and people may not really enjoy what they're doing. You can do it for a while, but not, on a long-term basis. So if you can truly find, what drives you, what's your passion, what's your purpose, and then overlay this, with this entire, complex organizational framework incorporates, and then figure out the right sub-function, the right, interlay of, functional expertise, domain knowledge, and soft skills, then it just opens up. So AI, whether it's in the area of data, whether it's in the area of customer, the whole, customer lifecycle mapping that I spoke about, and the entire data journey, we are only scratching the surface. There is lots that, firms can do. For example, when we moved to the cloud, we were able to basically integrate all our siloed data marts, into one single data lake. And after that, the kind of interplay, we could do with customers, in terms of giving them a 360-degree view, in terms of, giving them opportunity or a gateway, into our multiple services and products, our ability to customize at scale, and so on and so forth. I think it just opened up, an entirely new avenue. And you can also pick some niche areas. For example, everybody talks about digital transformation, but the typical language that people use is English. So for example, if you can combine that, with a multilingual perspective, you just open up, an entirely new avenue. So today, if people are creative, it's not just about picking up a ready-made job description, but you can also chart your own path. So I think that's how flexible, the world is today.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, you really have to chart your own path, but as you very well explained, you have to find that sweet spot and where you can marry all the three skill set, because just one set will not take you on long run. Absolutely, so put in beautifully. Thank you very much for answering all those questions. But now we would really like to open up the floor for everybody else in the webinar today. So, are you comfortable taking questions from our participants?
Absolutely.
All right, beautiful. So our first participant, Peter, he asks how to get more awareness of business problems. Do you suggest Kaggle or hackathons or industry contests that have an impact in job search for freshers?
I think it's a good question. See, to get awareness of business problems, the fastest way is to basically understand what customers want. And that's why, I harped on that, as the first step, the 5-step process. So if you're basically looking at, studying an industry, it's important to understand what are customers saying, what are their, real problems, or what are their needs. And a customer problem becomes a business problem because the firm exists to serve the customer. So I think, that's one. You can, of course, look at, forums like, Kaggle, or, hackathons, or, or various industry contests, because the underlying assumption here is that these forums have been set up based on, preliminary research on core business problems. And that's why, these forums have been set up as solutions. So of course, you can look at that. But that, from your perspective, does not become an understanding based on first principles. It basically becomes an understanding based on, a derived issue, right? But if you can get to the customer yourself and then understand it, nothing like it, because those insights can sometimes open up ideas which nobody else may have thought of. And therefore, you can be original and ensure that, you can take it forward. So that's what I would recommend.
I hope that helps, Peter. We'll move on to the next question. So I'm a CS engineering student aspiring to be a machine learning engineer. What does a machine learning engineer need to know?
Yeah. See, of course, a machine learning engineer, needs to know a lot, from a core technical perspective, because when you apply for a role in, ML, you'll obviously, be expected, have domain expertise in ML, right? Understand, how it works. But I think where you can differentiate yourself, compared to the others, is if you can also study firms and then understand what is the impact of ML. Because sometimes we get so caught up with what we know that we, start missing, the woods for the trees. So if you can basically understand the context in which, ML can make an impact, and then if that comes out in your conversations, nothing like it. I think that's exactly where you can start making a difference.
Sure. I hope that helps. We've got the third question from Suhas. What is the scope of conversational AI startups in CX in developing markets?
Yeah.
Customer
It's again
experience.
it's again a good question. Conversational AI, the point that I made, that today the owners have shifted from digitizing the physical to humanizing the digital. That's exactly where this comes in. And you have, quite a few startups in the area of conversational AI, across the entire spectrum. Conversational AI is, something which we also leverage, and, you do find, a lot of people, offering this. So certainly, there is scope in this. And, we are obviously, part of the developing market sphere, right? So if it works here, you assume that, it works in a lot of developing markets. What is important is, that we basically look at startups, and then also basically, figure out, what is the unique value proposition. Because if a unique value proposition comes in, that's when you're able to make a difference. So I think we need to, kind of scan the market and see, where do you have a unique value proposition, and if that can be leveraged, then you can, the sky's the limit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One more question, sir. What is the impact of metaverse in BFSI? Will there be a demand in AR, VR competency?
You see, metaverse is now the new buzzword in town, right? Just as blockchain used to be the latest buzzword in town, a
Yeah.
few years, ago. So I think there are a lot of approaches, being taken. You have one set of people, who are very bullish about it, right? You've seen a couple of very high-profile CEOs, right, who even talked about it and, renamed their firms, right? It's very obvious to, well, I'm not taking the name, right? But they've even renamed their firms, given the expected impact of, metaverse. You'll also have a set of people, who basically say, no, let's wait and watch, because when you look at a range of new technologies, sometimes the hype is so great that, in reality, you may find that, the impact is lesser. So some people, also, wait and watch. What is important in all of these is to go beyond the technology, right? Because ultimately, like I said, technology serves a need. So whether it's metaverse, whether it's blockchain, whether it's any other, whether it's even AR, VR, which underlies, metaverse, is to see whether it's meeting a core, customer need. Sometimes we also find that some technology may be ahead of time. So it's not necessarily about always being late. Sometimes they're also, ahead of time. So I think, we need to, kind of see. So as of now, there is a lot of talk on metaverse in terms of use cases and scale up. We're still, waiting for that scale up to happen. So that's the way, I see it right now.
Absolutely. Well, last question for the evening. What are the requirements to start a career in cloud computing if one is totally new to the field?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because, cloud computing, has been on the horizon, from a visibility perspective, for quite some time now. And the way I see it, I break this into, 2, 3 parts. One is obviously, to basically get a full understanding of, the entire data arena. To the point that I made earlier, today people don't just talk about customer journeys, they even talk about data journeys, right? Because you have a lot of footprint which is digital. So therefore, getting a full understanding of, data. The other is, from a cloud computing perspective, also understanding the whole landscape, because in terms of what exactly is required, from a technical perspective, right? You do a Google search, and then you will basically get, plenty of, sorry about that. You will get, plenty of, material out there. But I think what's important is to again understand from an overall firm's landscape, where does this fit in? How does it help, the firm create an impact? So I think getting an understanding, because if you know why you're doing this, we know the what and the how very well, but if you know the why, then that kind of, sustains you. So that is, the second aspect. The third aspect is, since there's also already a lot of, literature out there on cloud computing, it's also important to understand, what have been some of the success stories, and equally understand what have been some of the failures, so that if you
Yeah.
know them right upfront, then you can avoid making those mistakes and learn from others' experiences, as you go through. But overall, it's a very promising, option today.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I do apologize. We do have one more question. What
Sure.
is the future of no code AI ecosystem? I hope, Dharma, I'm reading it right. No code AI ecosystem. Which function can benefit from these?
Yeah. So again, if you look at this entire, low code, no code and low code, both the terms are, in vogue today, in terms of, to the point that I made about, buzzwords, right? This again, is something which we are seeing, we're seeing a lot of green shoots there. There are a lot of startups, in this area. And, today you go to any large corporate, you will find that, your inbox is besieged with, filled with, a lot of, value propositions, from startups, who are offering this no code, low code, ecosystem. Now let's look at the value proposition. What is the value proposition? The value proposition is, how can you democratize, this whole coding arena so that it becomes simple and scalable? And if you draw a parallel, not a strict parallel, but if you, take, for example, a somewhat similar parallel, from one aspect of BFSI, which is where when we move to the open source ecosystem, what we found is, that there was, you know, a takeoff, in terms of the extent to which, customers and firms could benefit. In fact, there was a talk which we had, with one of the most well-known, faces, in the technology landscape in India. I'm not taking the name here, but that person is one of the most, well-known persons, in this area. And the point that he made is, that when we move to open source, is when the whole system benefited. We've also seen, some societies outside India, where this has made an impact. Countries similar to India in terms of, size and complexity, where this has made an impact. So from that perspective, again, an area which is promising, but again, we just about, starting to see green shoots. So, like we spoke about in the area of, metaverse and various areas, right? I think we kind of, right now, as we get back into this hybrid world, we're just looking at all these and then seeing, how do they eventually scale up?
Absolutely. Oh God, we're getting one more question. Thank you, Danishta. Data regulations are more stringent in BFSI. Key global certification that can help in boosting your resume in BFSI.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one.
It's a good question, but I'd like to, put it, from a different dimension. It's not so much about, a global certification that can help you, right? Because today, if you look at, a lot of, profiles, you will find people who come in with certifications, but those certifications do not necessarily translate into expertise, right? You find that people may have the certificates, but you have a conversation and you find, that maybe, the expertise is not really there. So rather than worry necessarily about, this particular certification or that particular certification, I think it's going a little beyond. Of course, certification helps you from an academic perspective, right? Because you have basically, got this. But I think it's about understanding the first part of a question, that data regulation will obviously always be, stringent in BFSI, because when you're dealing with data, data is the gateway to the customer's financial assets. So you obviously have to protect, customers, interests. And that's why regulations will be there, the kind of data that you can share. Can you share it with, with customer consent, right? And how's the data getting stored, so on and so forth. So if you can understand the whole landscape, of why data regulations, what are the differences, from industry to industry, how does it, span out, across various countries, and then get that understanding right, then certification just becomes, let's say a tick in the box, right? Because when you have conversations, you're able to basically highlight how this is important. And the other important thing, from a customer perspective and from a firm's perspective is this constant conflict between protection and ease. So how can we hit that sweet spot? And if you can come in with expertise, on that, then you would have a, a winning proposition.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so very much for your enlightening session today, Mr. Dipu. We couldn't, thank you enough. I also would want to, thank you, the participants, for being so intriguing and asking such interesting questions. So on behalf of all of us and Team Edvanza, we would really like to thank you, Mr. Dipu, for your precious time and knowledge transfer with us. This was indeed a great learning experience. Well, for our participants, we are happy to share that the link for relevant courses with respect to today's discussion is right there in the chat box. The links are there. These limited time free courses will help you get closer towards your career in BFSI. And if at all you're stuck at any given point of your career journey, come speak with our career advisor, my team, and avail your one-on-one personalized sessions on career mapping and career building. Well, do follow us on social media handles on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and our YouTube channel. This is Team Edvanza signing off with Mr. Dipu today. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the week. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for, for a very interactive session, and wish you all a nice evening ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.